Now, touchdowns, this is Mike Evans all by himself. And Mike Evans has been incredible. 105 touchdowns. Chris Godwin's second with 39. Welcome to Just the Stats NFL, the show that covers the NFL statistical leaders from the all-time greats to the current players leading the NFL. I'm Ernie Jennings, your host, and it's time to move on from the NFC North to the NFC South. I'll be covering every team in the NFL. We're down to the last 8 teams, 30 days until the regular season starts. Can't wait. But today we're going to look at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who finished first in the NFC South. They finished with a record of 10 wins, 7 losses. At home, they were 5 wins, 4 losses. On the road, 5-3, and in the division, 4-2. So basically, winning record wherever they played, home, road, whatever. Unfortunately for them, in the wild card round, they lost to the Washington Commanders in a close game, 23-20. So how did the Tampa Bay Buccaneer players of 2024 stand in relation to the greatest the greatest Tampa Bay Buccaneer players of all time and to the NFL as a whole? Well, that's what we're going to find out on this episode of Just the Stats NFL. All right, let's start with the coaches. The all-time winningest coach, and it's not that many. The team's been around since only 1976, so they don't have as many stats as some other teams do. But the all-time winningest coach is John Gruden with 57 wins. Only one coach has a winning percentage over 600 with 633. That was Bruce Arians from 2019 to 2021 when he was 31 wins and 18 losses. Everybody else has just a really close record. Tony Dungy was second with 54 wins, so John Gruden just passed him. Tony Dungy had 54 wins. Now, Todd Bowles, current coach, also has just over winning percentages. Last season put him there with 3 wins over 500, gave him the 3 wins he has now. He's got 27 wins and 24 losses, so he's moved 3 games over 500. So he's current coach, really had a pretty good season. Probably could have won more games than they did, but we'll see how they do this year. In an interesting division, which is improving, but not one of the stronger ones. So we'll see as we'll look into that. But those are your coaches. Todd Bowles only needs 4 wins to tie Bruce Arians for 4th and 5 to pass him. So he'll definitely pass Bruce Arians to move into 4th. And then the next year he'll be able to catch John McKay, who has 44 wins. And I'm assuming, which I think is a safe assumption, that Todd Bowles will be there next year as well, unless there's some sort of complete collapse, and I doubt that seriously, not with the talent that team has. So let's move on to the players themselves, and we'll look at the quarterbacks. So the all-time leading quarterback is Jameis Winston, believe it or not. From 2015 to 2019, he ended up with 19,737 yards. Quite a big lead over Vinny Testaverde and Tom Brady, who in his brief time was able to move up into 3rd spot. Those are your top 3. Now, Baker Mayfield's already number 9, and he puts up another 4,500 yards. He'll be all the way up into 5th spot. So he'll be interesting to watch how far he can move up this list. And if he can finish off his career in Tampa Bay, I have no doubt that he'll be the leading quarterback for that team. So that's the yards in a career. Now let's look at the touchdowns. And again, that's Jameis and Winston. 121, but Tom Brady, not far behind with 108. The only 2 that have more than 100 touchdowns passing. So those are the 2 leaders there in that category. Now, none of these totals, obviously Tom Brady is one of the all-time greats when you throw in all the Patriot games. But he got, the vast majority of his yards there. I mean, he finished first in the NFL all-time in passing yards at 89,214. And with Tampa, he had 14,643. So you can see that he had the vast majority of his yards and touchdowns all came with New England Patriots. So he had 108 touchdowns, Tom Brady did, and he had 649 in his career. So he had 541 of those with New England. And that is, again, the all-time record. Now, when it comes to interceptions, the all-time leader there is Vinny Testaverde, amazingly by quite a big amount. He had 112 interceptions when he was a quarterback from 1987 to 1992. Winston, who also had a proclivity to throw interceptions, was second with 88. Those are your top two when it comes to interceptions. And the last category we'll look at for quarterbacks is sacks. And again, this was Vinny Testaverde, who had 197, closely followed by Jameis and Winston with 169 and Trent Dilfer with 168. So those are your leaders there. Interceptions, even though, let's look at this real quick. Mayfield threw, he had a ton of touchdowns, so not too bad there. Even though he threw 16 interceptions last season, he still had so many touchdowns. So he had a good ratio for the amount of passes he had. But currently, Mayfield is 10th with 26 interceptions for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So it's likely that if he had 16 again, he's going to move up quite a bit up the list to pass Brad Johnson for 7th. So that's about as high as he's going to get. And I think he would have a possibility of having this record all time, maybe, if he finishes out his career there, but we'll see. Now, like I said, for sacks, again, it's Vinny Testaverde. Baker Mayfield's already 7th with 80. So this is a category where he's definitely going to climb up the list, and we'll see how far he gets this year. Not a category you want to get on, but he'll probably break 100, and that would put him in 5th place all time as far as sacks go by for a quarterback. So right now you got a little bit of Vinny Testaverde and Jameis Winston at the top, but Baker Mayfield definitely has a chance to set all the best records, the yardage, the touchdowns in his career as he moves forward. And it won't even take that many years to do it, I wouldn't think. Let's look at running backs. Well, here you don't have anybody that's too high on this list, so you have some chances that some of these newer guys can get up this list at some point. James Wilder from 1981 to 1989 had 5,957 yards rushing. So really no running back with a great amount. You have a fullback back when they had those, and they were a definite good player or a position that had some dominance. Mike Alstott from 1996 to 2006 had 5,088 yards. So those are your top two. Now, Rachaad White has 2,084 yards to finish 11th right now. But as we know, Bucky Irving already in his first year is 18th on the list with 1,122 yards. So he could make the top 10 with a 1,000-yard season this year. And he's definitely the player, if he continues at the pace he's on now, to top this list and on a second contract. Hopefully he'll get that, continues to play well for the team. So those are your top running backs as far as yards go. Now, when it comes to touchdowns, Mike Alstott, by a good margin over James Wilder, 58 touchdowns to 37. Those are your top two. Only two players over 30 touchdowns. Not that many, really. So here's another category. Rachaad White has 10 currently, and Bucky Irving has 8 in his first season. So he'll be a while before he catches Alstott, but he could definitely in a couple of years start pushing the top 3 or 4 running backs. So again, a category where they don't have any big players going right now. So now when it comes to receiving, that's a different story because you have Mike Evans. Mike Evans has been incredible. 1,000-yard seasons year after year, every year. He'll break Jerry Rice's record, which he's tied with this year if he has another 1,000-yard season. But as far as receptions go, again, he's the top guy with 836 receptions to Chris Godwin, who has 579, who's also a good player, but has a tendency lately to miss a lot of time due to health reasons. Now, James Wilder is third as a running back. He's in the third position with 430 receptions. So he's the top running back in receptions. They really don't have any tight ends that are that high. I mean, Jimmy Giles is 10th with 279. He played with the team from 1978 to 1986. So those are your top players as far as receiving goes. And again, as I said, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin top the list. So the current players are pushing this mark up, way up. I mean, prior to those two coming to the team, it was James Wilder as a running back with 430 receptions, and they just went skyrocketing past them, especially Mike Evans. And they're going to continue to push this number even higher. Mike Evans is pushing, 1,000 receptions. There's only been 15 players with 1,000 receptions in their career. So he has 2 more years, the kind of pace he's been doing, getting in the 70s. He's hit 70 or more receptions for 5 straight years. So he does that 2 more years, he'll get to 1,000. Be very impressive. It may take a little bit more than that. He needs 164, so he'd need about 82 receptions a season to get there. But he has a chance in 2 years to be the 16th player to hit the 1,000. Even though I do believe DeAndre Hopkins, for one, and is going to also get up there. So, and Davante Adams, there's another couple of players that are looking to hit the 1,000 reception mark. But still, quite an incredible season that Mike Evans has had. Last season, he averaged 15.2 yards a catch, which is how you can get to 1,000 on so few catches. When you're averaging 70s as far as receptions, you got to have a pretty good yards per reception amount. When it does come to yards, total yards, he has 12,684 yards receiving, which is the most over Chris Godwin again, who has 7,266. The previous high had been set by Mark Carrier from 1987 to 1992 with 5,018. So those two players have just crushed that number. Just really, the type of team they have now has changed so dramatically with Baker Mayfield, Evans, and Godwin, and all the new receivers they have as well. And then with Irving coming out of the backfield. So you got a lot of passing going on, which makes for a really fun team to watch. Now, touchdowns, this is Mike Evans all by himself. And Mike Evans has been incredible. 105 touchdowns. Chris Godwin second with 39. Jimmy Giles, as a tight end, held the record from 1978 to 1986 when he had 34. That was the old record, 34. So Mike Evans, again, demolished it. Mike Evans is already 9th all-time in touchdowns receiving. So another category where he's just really been dominant. He only needs 6 to tie Tony Gonzalez for 8th all-time. So I think that he'll be able to do that without a problem. Antonio Gates would be the next guy on the list. He needs 11 to tie Antonio Gates, which is definitely a possibility. Be a little more difficult to do. Interestingly, Davante Adams, another great player, came into the league the same year as Mike Evans, is right behind him in touchdowns with 103. So 105 to 103. So be fun to watch those two players as they battle it out for current players and the most touchdowns by current players. So that'll be fun to watch. So those, again, Mike Evans, top guy for the team, and he holds all the records now as far as receiving goes for this team. Let's look at the defense, and we'll start with interceptions. Rabi Abdullah from well, let me get that. That's not correct. Sorry about that. Actually, Ronde Barber, that makes more sense, leads the team with 47 interceptions. He did that from 1997 to 2012. Has a pretty good margin over Donnie Abraham, who was with the team from 1996 to 2001 with 31. Those are your top two. And currently, well, it was Lavonte David. And let me check that out real quick. Yeah, Lavonte David is the top current player. He has only 13. And he's been on the team for 12 years, 13 years, seasons. So he's not going to do much here. I don't even think he can move up one spot. He'd have to jump up to 17. So he'd have to have 4 interceptions this season. So as far as interceptions, I don't see anybody this season making any moves on the record books of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, when it comes to tackles for loss, though, here's where Lavonte David has been incredible. He has 169 tackles for loss, which is by far, Ronde Barber was second with 88. So those are your top two. Lavonte David currently is 9th all-time in the NFL for tackles for loss. So he's had an incredible season when it comes to tackles for loss. And he's actually, there's 3 players in 6. He'll jump from 9th to 6th. All he has to do is have 3 tackles for loss, and he'll move all the way to 6th. And then Julius Peppers is in 5th with 175, and Aaron Donald with 176 is 4th. So he definitely has a chance to move as high as 4th place all time in tackles for loss. In 3rd place currently is Calais Campbell, who is also still playing. He's trying to move up past J.J. Watt for 2nd place all time. So those are 2 active players on the tackles for loss all-time list. So that's a character we'll want to watch, Lavonte David, and see how many games it takes him. Maybe 1 game, 2 games, 3 at the most, I would think, to move into 6th place all-time. Now, sacks all-time, this is Leroy Selmon. Great player, had 78.5 sacks. Warren Sapp was second with 77 sacks. Leroy Selmon played from 1976 to 1984, and then Warren Sapp from 1995 to 2003. Those are your top 2 players as far as sacks go. Currently, Lavonte David, again, is leading the team. So while he's great in the tackles for loss, sacks, he's got 39 in his career. So he doesn't really get too many sacks per season. So I don't see him moving too far up the list. After him, I'm looking for somebody else that might, Vita Vea. But again, he's been not in the league quite so long. Since 2018, he's been with the team. Vita Vea has 30.5. So this isn't a department where they have anybody really standing out as far as sacks go. So we'll see what this season brings for the defense. All right. That's your defense, and that's your all-time career records. Let's look at the single season records and see where some of these players stand. Well, again, this is Tom Brady briefly in his brief time with a team has 3 of the top 4 spots. Pretty incredible. Tom Brady passed Jameis and Winston, who had the record with 5,109 yards in 2019. And then Tom Brady came along in 2021 and had 5,316 passed him by a couple hundred yards. Those numbers are so impressive, whereas running backs don't have any great spot on the record books. And then, of course, Mike Evans is making some records all time in the NFL in receiving. Tom Brady, with the 5,316 yards, was number 3 all time with that total in a single season. And even Jameis and Winston's number 10 all time with his 5,109. Only 15 times has a quarterback thrown for more than 5,000 yards in the entire history of the NFL. So that's very impressive. What's equally impressive is that Drew Brees did it 4 times. 5 times, make that 5 times. So 5 of the 15 belong to Drew Brees by himself. Very incredible quarterback. So Baker Mayfield had quite a season. He finished 5th all time with 4,500 yards. So that's pretty incredible. Now, when you're looking at his numbers, get this over here. This past season, he finished 3rd. Baker Mayfield did in the NFL, 3rd behind only Joe Burrow and Jared Goff. Jared Goff had 4,629, so not too far behind. But Joe Burrow had a big lead with 4,918 yards. So those are your top 3 quarterbacks as far as yards go. Now, when it comes to touchdowns, here again, Baker Mayfield almost caught Tom Brady. Tom Brady holds the record he set in 2021 with 43 touchdowns in a single season. This past season, Baker Mayfield had 24. I mean, in 2024, he had 41 touchdowns. So very impressive. In fact, threw touchdown at a higher percentage rate. Tom Brady had thrown a touchdown at a 6% rate. Baker Mayfield did it at a 7.2% rate. So really impressive. And with those touchdowns, again, Baker Mayfield tied for 2nd with Lamar Jackson with 41, and Joe Burrow had 43. So those 3 were the only quarterbacks with 40 or more touchdowns. Puts Baker Mayfield in some good company. He has really blossomed in Tampa Bay, and you know for a fact Cleveland would just die to have him back on their team with all the kind of stuff that's going on with them. Now, when it comes to interceptions in a single season, Vinny Testaverde had 35 in 1988, 35 touchdowns. Jameis and Winston tried to catch him in 2019 when he had his 5,100 yards. He had 30 interceptions, which is terrible, really. Just to show you, interestingly enough, that year, Jameis and Winston was incredible. I mean, he was throwing 33 touchdowns, but he had 30 interceptions. So the year that he had 5,000, like I said, there's only 15 players that have had 5,000 or more yards passing, and his total was 10th highest. While Tom Brady, when he was putting up his 5,300 yards, he had 43 touchdowns, but only 12 interceptions. So you could see Jameis and Winston was just a incredible, interesting, fun player to watch because you just didn't know. He would throw the ball out there and see who could catch it. And, obviously half the time his guy got it and the other half, the other team got the interception, but pretty interesting. Now, this past season, Baker Mayfield, this is a little category you could work on some, but he did have 16 interceptions, but to 41 touchdowns. So not too bad. He tied Kirk Cousins for most interceptions in a season for this past 2024 season, though Kirk Cousins only had 18 touchdowns to his 16 interceptions. So big difference as far as the ratio goes. Baker Mayfield was doing about 2.5 to 1 touchdown to interception. So not too bad. So those are your leaders in those categories. Now, when we're looking at sacks, all time for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, you have 3 players. Jameis and Winston was sacked 47 times in 2019 to tie the record that Steve Young had set in 1986 when he had 47. And then again, Trent Dilfer tied it in 1995 when he had 47 as well. So 3 players with 47. Baker Mayfield now, this past season, was unfortunately able to put himself 5th all-time on the list with 40. 40 is quite a high total for sacks. And in fact, the 40 put Baker Mayfield at 9th in the NFL last season. Quite a ways behind the leader, Caleb Williams, who had 68, though. So 40, that's a number you want to see go down a little bit, but I think that's somewhat in the nature of Baker Mayfield's style. In fact, I think he's similar to, in some ways, to Winston, just a better quarterback overall. But he's willing to make the pass, hang on to the ball to make the right throw, whereas Jameis and Winston did the same thing, but sometimes didn't quite make the right throw. So those are your quarterbacks. Again, a great quarterback going right now. Mayfield's really been putting up some excellent numbers. Let's look at single season as far as rushing goes. This is James Wilder, 1984. So this has been the record for quite a long time now, 30 years, 40 years. Make that 40 years. James Wilder has held this record of 1,544 yards rushing in a single season. That is the record. Now, Bucky Irving was able to place himself 10th all-time on the list with his 1,122 yards. I don't know if he can catch this number. He might be able to, but we'll see. That's a little. I think that's a number that may be kind of out of Bucky Irving's reach. We'll see. But with 1,122 yards this past season, Bucky Irving was able to finish in 10th place rushing wise. Incredibly, there were 16 running backs that had 1,000 or more yards, which, as I was saying in an earlier podcast, that used to be a standard that you wanted to try to reach. But when you have half the teams have a player that's making 1,000 yards, it kind of makes you think maybe something like 1,500 yards, especially if they add another game to the season. A higher number needs to be a standard of excellence. But still, 1,122 is not bad. He averaged 5.4 yards a carry. That's pretty good. Now, when it comes to touchdowns in a single season, James Wilder, again, the same year, 1984, had 13 touchdowns rushing. That's the most ever. Bucky Irving last season had 8 to tie for 8th all-time as far as Tampa Bay goes. So 8's not too bad, you know. Last season, Derrick Henry, Jamar Gibbs, and James Cook all had 16 touchdowns. So that's impressive. So Bucky Irving finished right in the middle of the pack at 15th as far as with his 8 touchdowns. So those were your leading rushers. Definitely Bucky Irving's a guy to watch. He has a chance to maybe improve on his numbers this next season. We'll just have to watch and see. Now, looking at the receivers. So despite Mike Evans consistently being as far as yardage goes and so forth, he does not hold the record for receptions in a single season. Amazingly, Keyshawn Johnson in 2001 had 106 receptions. Chris Godwin in 2022 almost caught him with 104. Those are the only 2 times a receiver has had more than 100 receptions for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This is a team with one of the fewest totals like that. I think the Chicago Bears might be another one where you have so few people who have 100 receptions. Only 2 times it's even happened. Chris Godwin, Mike Evans were close. They're the only 2 even in the 90s. So you have Chris Godwin with 98, Mike Evans with 96, and then Mark Carrier with 86 was the high total until Keyshawn Johnson set the record. So this is a number you would think, especially if Chris Godwin, who catches a lot of shorter passes, if he could just stay on the field for an entire season, he would have a chance to break that record. But we'll see this next season. Now, this past season, only Mike Evans, I'm sorry. Mike Evans had 74 to lead the team with 74 receptions. So, again, really not as impressive when it comes to that. And that just put him way down the list at 28th. Amazingly, 28 on the list. He still was able to get 1,000 yards, just barely crossing the 1,000 yards with 1,004 yards. And we'll look at that now. The yardage, all-time yardage is Mike Evans, though. In 2018, he had 1,524 yards, averaging 17.7 yards a reception. Really impressive. He had broken a record that had been around for 29 years, so that was something to see. Mark Carrier in 1989 had 1,422 yards. Those are your top totals. So again, you have quite a variety of players here. Vincent Jackson in 2012 is third. Chris Godwin in 2019 had 1,333. And then you have Mike Evans again in 2016. So you can obviously you're going to see Mike Evans because he's always getting 1,000 yards. But this past season, again, as I said, he had 1,004, which is good enough only for 28th on the list all time for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And with 1,004, he finished 23rd in the NFL. Incredibly, here's again the thing about the 1,000 yards. 24 players in the NFL had 1,000 or more yards. That's incredible. So again, you think the standard needs to be a little higher than 1,000, but there were 24 players, and then you had 3 with 10 or only 10 or less yards away from that. So we'll see how many this year get to 1,000 yards, but it's this number that can be reached, seems to be readily. Now, when it comes to touchdowns in a single season, obviously, when I've already talked about how amazing Mike Evans has been in his career as far as touchdowns go, Mike Evans holds the top 6 spots when it comes to touchdowns in a single season. 2021, he had 14. That's the most they've had. This past season, he had 11. So with 11, he was 4th in the NFL. Jamar Chase led the NFL in receptions with 127, in yards with 1,708, and in touchdowns with 17. So he had a big lead. Terry McLaurin was second with 13. Amon-Ra St. Brown had 12, and then Mike Evans had 11. So very impressive numbers for Mike Evans when it comes to receiving. All right. Now, looking at the defense, that'll be our last thing to check out here. We'll start with interceptions. And as far as interceptions go, get to that real quick here. Ronde Barber had 10 interceptions in 2001. That's a good amount. And in Cedric Brown in 1981 had 9. Those are your top 2 players when it comes to interceptions. Not quite high enough to make the all-time list, but 10s, you get double digits in interceptions. You're doing something there. It really is impressive. Looking at the defense this past season, as far as interceptions go, I tell you, every time I want to bring up the interceptions, when I get to the defense, it always wants to do something different than what I wanted to do. So Kirby Joseph for Detroit had 9 interceptions. That was the most. And then Xavier McKinney for Green Bay had 8. Those are your top 2 players as far as interceptions go. And let me find I was looking for a Tampa Bay Buccaneer. I'm looking for my list of the Tampa Bay defense. All right, let me see here. Their 2024 season. That's what I want to get here. If you'll hang on for 1 second, I'll get it. Oh, I did have it here. I don't know what happened. When I have so many windows open sometimes, but I just want to get the season up here so we can look at that. All right. So this past season, looking at the defense when it comes to interceptions, well, you had Zion McCollum had 2, and Tyke Smith had 2. That's it. In fact, there were only 7 interceptions for the team in the entire team. So really not impressive. Somewhere, again, this defense, which is, if you're into fantasy football, it's the same thing with the Cincinnati Bengals as the Tampa Bay. The defense lacks somewhat, so you're going to see a lot of scoring. So if you're into fantasy football, you love Baker Mayfield, the receivers, Bucky Irving, because you're going to see them out on the field and you're going to see Baker Mayfield throwing the ball a lot. So that's something fun to watch. Now, when we look at tackles for loss, Lavonte David, as we've already talked about, dominates in that category, and he's already on the all-time top 10 list. But in 2013, he had 21, which he broke the record he had set the year before with 20. In 2012, he had 20. So he's 2 times he had 20 or more. Warren Sapp in 2000 also had 20. Those are the top numbers. So that's pretty impressive. Good numbers. And to show you, Yaya Diaby had 13 tackles for loss this past season. And obviously, Lavonte David, who's been in the league for quite a while now, since 2012, had 9. He still had 9. So, like I said, he needs 3 to move into 6th place. So, I think he can get that. But those are your top players. Diaby had 13. Cansey had 11 to lead the team. And when it comes to sacks, all time, Shaquille Barrett in 2019 had 19 and a half sacks. Had a big lead over Warren Sapp, who had 16 and a half. And then I don't always do this, but Simeon Rice, just to show you how good a player he was, he had the next 3 spots. In 2005, he had 14. 2003, he had 15. And 2002, he had 15 and a half. So very consistent numbers he had. But Shaquille Barrett with 19 and a half is the best the teams had. Now, this past season, sacks were kind of split up, but nobody really stood out. Cansey had 7.5. Vita Vea had 7. Those are your top 2. And then Lavonte David had 5.5. So those are your top 3. So it's an area where they don't have anybody dominating on defense right now. Interceptions, sacks, tackles for loss, any of those categories. So you might see some improvement, maybe with some new younger players, and we'll just see how that goes. All right, well, that is the team. So what did we say about the team going into 2025? Well, the odds makers have them at 9.5 wins, which is what they had last year, or they had 10.5, I think, and they didn't quite make it. They only had 10 wins. So I do think that they can get to 10 wins again. Now, whether that's good enough to win the division this year is another story, and we'll talk about that after we've looked at the entire division. But as far as the odds with them at 9.5 wins, I definitely think they can get to 10 wins. Despite losing their offensive coordinator with Liam Cohen to the Jaguars, Josh Grizzard moved up from the pass game coordinator to the offensive coordinator. So you have continuity to some degree. He was within the system. He knows how it went. So I don't expect Cohen leaving to be a major issue for the team. Their overall strength of schedule is somewhat in the middle of the pack, but it's the 14th easiest. So it's not that difficult. Now they have tried to, like I was saying, this past season, their defense lacked somewhat. So they've tried to add some edge rushing power and depth in their secondary. So you might see some more interceptions, a few more sacks, and so forth, which will be an improvement. And then again, Bucky Irving, back for his second season. Obviously, you would expect an even better season than he had in his first season. So I don't think 10 wins is anywhere out of the line for this team going into the next season. Now, when you're looking at them from a fantasy outlook, who do you want to pick up off this team? Well, you got quite a few. I mean, Baker Mayfield to start with, um, he was quarterback 5 last season. I mean, now he had some career numbers, but so you have to wonder, is he going to drop a little bit? He had 4,500 yards passing last season. Some of the projections are more like 4,200 yards, 32 interceptions instead of 41. But who knows? He could still hit 40 again. If he can cut back on the interceptions, that's helpful. But he'll definitely, I think, be a top 10. And one category that you don't see mentioned a lot is rushing. Baker Mayfield rushed for 378 yards last season. Not too bad. So, for example, I mean, Josh Allen rushed for like 531, so he's not too far behind that. So he's kind of a sneaky runner. He had 3 rushing touchdowns on top of the 41 he had throwing. So that really helps his fantasy stats. So he's a quarterback that you can see going as early as the 5th round by some. I wouldn't pick him up. And he's quarterback 7 right now and going around the same time as Bo Nix and Kyle Murray. So it's just it kind of depends if you want to gamble, like say on Bo Nix having a better season than he had in his rookie season, or if you want a little bit more of the stability that Baker Mayfield has, then you might want to go with him. And Kyler Murray, again, could be he could be good. He's been a little too up and down, good game, bad game type of thing. Whereas Baker Mayfield's pretty steady, and you know he's going to throw the ball. So if he drops, to the 6th round, he's definitely somebody you want to grab. He's been going around the 6th, end of the 6th, early 7th. So you wait. If you see him around that point and it's time you probably want to grab him if you haven't grabbed a quarterback earlier. Now, when it comes to running backs, obviously Bucky Irving is somebody you want to look at. I mean, he led the team in rushing, so that's impressive. And then even he had 47 receptions as well. So he had another 392 yards receiving. So he's very interesting player to watch. He had 8 rushing touchdowns, none receiving. So I would expect that, he, instead of 1,100 yards, I think he could push, higher than that, 1,200 yards, maybe 10 touchdowns and over 50 receptions. And you throw in maybe 1-2 passing touchdowns. So he's somebody. So I think he'll easily have 10 total touchdowns. So I think he's going to have a much better year than he had last year. He's been he's been the 28th player off the board. So going in the early 3rd round right now. So if you're somebody who's picking at the beginning of the 3rd round, you might want to grab him, because if you don't, you're not going to see him by the time you pick again. If you in the middle of the 3rd round, you might gamble and see if he drops to you. But early 3rd round, you might want to grab him. But he's definitely a good player and all these numbers I'm talking about PPR. That's usually what I play, and so as a PPR guy, those receptions really do matter. Same as a quarterback as far as PPR goes. Now, wide receivers, again, Mike Evans has been going about 31st off the board, middle of the 3rd round, because he's just a guaranteed kind of guy. And despite the fact that he doesn't get as many receptions, like I said, in the 70s, he's still getting 1,000 yards and he's still getting 10 plus touchdowns. The touchdowns is where he really stands out. It really helps his numbers jump up. So he's, again, somebody in the 3rd round. If you want him, if you're late 3rd round, you might not get him. So it just kind of depends where you pick. Now, the other players, say Chris Godwin, he's already hurt. He just had some issues with his ankle and different things. So when he's healthy, he gets a lot of catches. He plays a different role. That's a short intermediate passes versus what Mike Evans is getting. So in PPR, he can really stand out. He's been getting picked up in the middle of the 6th round sometimes, but I think he might be dropping a little bit just because of his health issues. But, if you're interested in him and he may not stand out for you right away, you could pick him up, and then if you have the room, stash him a little bit. And if you do something like that, let's say he doesn't really get going right away, the third wide receiver they have is their rookie, Emeka Egbuka. Now he's their first round pick. You picked him in the first round, so they want to get him out there on the field, and he should immediately be able to step into the slot. Again, this is kind of the same spots that Godwin's in, a short to intermediate passing game and so forth. Let's say that Godwin can't play. He's a guy you could pick up way in the 11th round. He's being drafted around the 116th point. So he's somebody that possibly could just jump off this board either early in the season or maybe later. And you still have McMillan too. But I don't know. I think that this rookie they just picked up, Egbuka, hopefully I'm saying that correctly, will be a guy they're really looking at. I mean, I like the way Tampa Bay is thinking ahead. I mean, as great as Mike Evans is, he's got to slow down sooner or later. So they've already, and same with Chris Godwin, but they've already got these 2 young wide receivers to just step in right behind him. Now, when coming to tight ends, here's a tight end, Cade Otton. He's not even being drafted in a lot of times, but he still finished in the top 10, I believe it was, somewhere around there as far as tight ends. So if you're somebody that wants to rotate tight ends, you don't pick up one of those, the top 3, say, McBride or Bowers or Kittle, and you're just going to wait. Otton's an easy one to pick up off the waiver wire or your last pick of your team, and just pick him up, and you pick up one other guy, one other tight end, and you just kind of rotate them depending on who they're playing. But he's been sneaky good, and he's just not even being, like I said, he's just sitting on the waiver wire most of the time. So you got a lot of players for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers that are fantasy relevant. So they have a good team. They're going to have a fun team to watch. But I think that's about it for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Next up is the Atlanta Falcons, another team that's got some exciting things going on as well. So we'll have to look at them at the next time I have a podcast. So stick around as I continue through the NFC so you can hear about the greatest players from your favorite team. And check out my previous podcasts on YouTube at Just the Stats NFL. You can catch everything there. If you have any comments, you can leave them there, or you can leave a comment at justthestatsnfl@gmail.com, Facebook, X, any of those places. So hope you enjoyed this podcast. Stick around for the next one. And that is a wrap for this episode of Just the Stats NFL. I am out.